Boston's historic Faneuil Hall is well known as a cradle of liberty, a meeting place for patriots coming together in the War of Independence. But the wealth that built the hall that was donated to the city also came from slavery. Over the past couple of years, some people in Boston have been trying to address the contradiction, whether by changing the name of the hall or by confronting the city's history of slavery through public art. A proposal for a slave auction memorial at the hall was recently withdrawn by artist Steve Locke following considerable opposition from the community. Our guest is part of the opposition, the president of the Boston chapter of the Boston NAACP, Tanisha Sullivan. Thank you very much for being with us, Tanisha.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
First of all, let's just start with the history itself and what people here need to see more clearly.
So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. I absolutely believe personally that this is an issue that we need to discuss. And as an organization, of course, it's of paramount importance to us that we have an understanding as a city of our history, the great parts of our history, as well as some of the more challenging aspects of our history. And so in one of those challenging aspects is certainly the role that Bostonians played in really enabling the slave movement and the slave trade here in the United States. I do want to be clear at the outset that the NAACP never objected to the idea of having a memorial to honor and memorialize our enslaved ancestors and to also acknowledge the role that Boston played in the slave trade. What we took exception to was the process and how we got to really a final determination about what that memorial would be, where it would be, who would design it, and who was part of the conversations or not leading up to those decisions. We really believe that this is such an important moment for us as a city that we must be inclusive in the conversations leading up to any determination relative to a memorial. And so with that, what we're hoping is that while this particular proposal was withdrawn, we're hoping that the conversation continues across the city because it is an important one, and we're hopeful, we're confident that as a city, and specifically as a Black community, that we'll be able to come together collectively and figure out what should a memorial look like? And even more importantly, or I should say equally as important, what are the conversations we need to have leading up to that memorial actually being realized?
What about Steve Locke? He says he reached out, there was a missed opportunity there. What's your take on this?
So I do understand that the artist has stated that he called me, and quite frankly, Chris, it's possible that he did. I'm accused by my mom sometimes of not returning her phone call. But that being said, what did not happen was there was not an outreach to the community. This is not about me. And it's not about the NAACP. It really is about the broader Black community specifically. This is the community that Black American community specifically who there was a desire to actually memorialize our ancestors. And so what did not happen in this particular process was an outreach to community or an opportunity for community to come together to learn more about the idea and for community as a whole to have a voice in what they wanted to see. We have to remember this is public. This was a public memorial in a public space using public dollars. And so the public should have had, and I believe should have going forward, a voice in all of this.
I see in the whole topic of slavery here a dilemma for an artist, not to mention the broader public, is that on one hand, you want to be upfront about it, you don't want to sugarcoat the history, but on the other hand, slavery is a definition of the Black community imposed from the outside. So how do you get around that?
Well, so I want to be clear on this point. There's nothing wrong with tackling something that's difficult and, or something that might bring up some pain. Actually, I think that as a city, wrestling with that pain and experiencing the pain as we go through a conversation would be healthy for us if done appropriately, and if done in a way that is meant to have a positive outcome at the end. And so I don't think that this is a discussion that we should be running away from in any way, shape, or form. I think that, quite frankly, in 2019, with everything that's going on across our nation, this is the time for us to really wrestle with that and have some difficult conversations and really push through as a city. You know, Boston, is like many other cities across the country. We still struggle with issues of race and racism. But what is a little bit different about us here in Boston is that we tend to try to avoid, hitting the conversation head on. I'm hopeful that, over the next few months, we'll make a decision that we want to hit the conversation head on, and with the hope that the outcome will be positive for all of us.
Any other parties you think should be involved in this?
Absolutely. I think, again, I think it's critically important for the whole community to have an opportunity to participate in the conversation. But I think we need to be very intentional about bringing Black Americans into the conversation, because, it is Black American ancestors who were enslaved in this country. And so, and then, of course, we need to make sure that the conversation is structured such that it includes, our white neighbors, because they were very much, this is all of our history. So I'm hopeful that this will happen. We have demonstrated, as a city, that we're capable of having these types of conversations, meaning, convening the public to talk about these types of memorials, like we did with the MLK Memorial. Some people may still, have disagreement about whether or not we should have an MLK Memorial. But what people cannot, or would they be hard pressed to debate, is whether or not there was an opportunity for inclusive participation in that instance. So I'm hopeful that we'll get there again.
This is BNN News. We're talking with Tanisha Sullivan from the Boston chapter of the NAACP. Tanisha, the national convention for the NAACP will be in Boston. And before we get into that, talk about the history. Boston is not just any old city. This is an important city. It
is a very important city. Here in Boston, we are honored to be the first chartered branch of the association. For those who don't know, the NAACP was founded in 1909 by a multiracial coalition of folks. And in 1911, we were given the opportunity to be the first chartered branch of the association. The first president of the association, Moorfield Story, was the first president of the association. We have a very long history here in Boston with the NAACP, and quite frankly, many of the policy initiatives on the national level have found their way through, have Boston roots. I learned very recently, fun fact for me, that at our 1950 convention, NAACP convention, it was held here in Boston. And it was the last time that a convention was held at a church. And that convention was held at Union United Methodist in the South End. And it was at that convention that, as an association, we decided to pursue Brown versus the Board of Education. So there is such a rich history for Boston and for the Boston NAACP. And we're just looking forward to celebrating all of that over the coming year.
Any ideas what you'd like to see with events next year?
Oh, absolutely. The convention will take place toward the end of July of 2020. We will be on the Seaport, and the national office will work very diligently to produce a convention that is productive, of course. But for us leading up to the convention, what we're looking forward to is using this as an opportunity for us to have some real meaningful conversations about racial inequity across the city and across the Commonwealth. And more importantly, what are we going to do collectively to tackle it? When we look at economic inequality, what we all know is that we still have a very deep racial wealth gap. And when we look at education, we know that we have persistent racial achievement and opportunity gaps, health disparities. The Globe Spotlight series highlighted all of those issues for us. This is a very real opportunity for us collectively to really look at solutions for addressing those issues, so that when we get to the convention, we have an opportunity to share, some of the what I would say some of the successes that we have here in this area when it comes to addressing racial disparities, but also we have a list of those things that, you know what, we're still struggling with. And we will then have the benefit of a national convention to talk about it and perhaps get some support from other parts of the country when it comes to identifying solutions.
Of course, what about neighborhoods in Boston? Is there some place you would like to take a visitor and show them something interesting?
Absolutely. It's critically important for us that this convention doesn't just stay on the Seaport. As we know, the Seaport is the least racially and ethnically and class diverse, economically diverse neighborhood in our city. So it is important for us that conventioneers, delegates have an opportunity to experience really the rich culture of our city and specifically the Black community here. And so we will be looking for ways to not only connect our delegates to Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, and other parts of the city, but also looking for ways for our residents here in the city of Boston to partake in this convention. It is going to take all of us to help ensure that this convention is a grand success, not just in terms of kind of a logistical success, but really a success in terms of impact. It's our hope that this convention will serve as a catalyst for the work that will that will come beyond July of 2020, and that it will really have a positive impact on our residents here in the city of Boston, specifically the Black community. And so with that, we are looking to have, a diverse array of suppliers and vendors participating in the convention, specifically looking for Black businesses to participate. We're estimating about $11 million at least that will come into the city as a result of this convention, and we want those dollars to really impact our neighborhoods. So we are working aggressively to make sure that that happens.
It sounds like this is almost like a laboratory for what can be done by other parties.
Well, hopefully, and it's interesting you should say that, because one of the things, for me personal goal is that this convention does present us with an opportunity to perhaps change the way that we engage with one another when it comes to addressing some of our challenges. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to bring together parties who perhaps haven't had the opportunity to work together before, and to really move forward an agenda that, again, has a lasting impact on our residents and our business community, our philanthropic community, academia, higher ed here in the city of Boston and across the Commonwealth. I think that this is, with the energy that we're seeing, I think that this is a tremendous opportunity for us to come together, not just in coalescing around this convention, but to really rethink how we engage with one another going forward so that we can truly get the best of Boston out of the best of us in Boston.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Tanisha Sullivan from the Boston NAACP.